the time I was 15 years old and it was so awkward. And me and my friend were like, what is this guy doing? All of a sudden he was like, girls, take out a pad of paper. Matter of fact, here's a pad of paper. Take it. Here's a pen. I want you to write something down. And he said, you guys are going to be old enough to where you're going to need to get a job and you're going to have to live on your own. It was literally fourth grade math. But the way he broke it down to us was, this is what it is going to cost you to be financially independent. I had found myself in a women's shelter. It was the result of a domestic abuse situation, which is also something that women face. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, that was a paradigm shift for me. That role in life gave me something more than at the time I could find within myself to strive for, to make something of myself. Savings is not about how much you save. How much you are setting aside is irrelevant. What's more powerful for you is the habit of every time I get money, I set some aside so that when that opportunity meets your preparation, you have that habit.
What does it take to be a financially empowered woman? And what can financially empowered women do together to change the world? A shocking statistic is that around 400,000 women in Australia are at risk of homelessness. And the cause of this is the lack of education about how to build a financial foundation, starting even before we first enter the workforce and well into our retirement years. My name's Dion Payne, and I'm the founder of the Financially Empowered Women podcast. I'm passionate about ending homelessness, and as part of that passion, I chose to look at the systemic barriers that are causing homelessness for women in the first place. The Financially Empowered Women podcast is designed to bring you the best experts from around the world to increase your financial know-how and give you practical and women-specific tips to overcome the challenges you might be facing, such as how to negotiate a better salary, demystifying super, or how to navigate a separation and ensure the assets are distributed fairly. My role is to provide you with the best information out there to change your trajectory and become a financially empowered woman, because you deserve it, and the world needs you more than ever to own your worth and help others to do the same. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the Financially Empowered Women podcast. My name's Dion Payne. I'm your host for today, and I'm joined today by Chelsea Williams. Let me tell you a little bit about Chelsea. Now, Chelsea is a certified financial expert and chief wealth officer for women. I love that title, by the way. Chelsea's on a mission to help women rewrite their financial stories and take control of their money. Chelsea is also a speaker and founder of Money Mastery, a financial literacy agency dedicated to helping women build wealth and break free from financial barriers. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Now, Chelsea, I love the sound of the work that you do with women, and I believe that it's really important. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to doing what you do now?
Absolutely. It's always interesting when I tell this story, because when you meet somebody who does something, usually their story is like, I went through such this hard, difficult time and I just scratched my way out of this hole and overcame all of these things. And that's not my story. My story is that, first of all, my first money lesson came from a city bus driver when me and my friend were on our way to the mall to spend our allowance. It wasn't from school, which is part of the problem, and it wasn't from my parents. And I think that's a lot of people's stories. So it started with a city bus driver, and I have never had issues with money. I've never been homeless. Now that is not to say that I have never had not a lot of money. It was a struggle, and I had to work 2 jobs while going to school full time and taking out loans for a degree. So just because I've never really struggled with money does not mean that I had a lot of it, because I absolutely did not. I got assistance from, my local state and government, all of the things. And while I was going to college, it was actually for healthcare administration. And that's when I took my first accounting class, had no idea what it was, but it made complete sense to me. And most people hated it. So I thought to myself, if this makes sense to me and most people can't stand it, I should probably run with this. And that was about 15 years ago. And since then, my journey has been from accountant to chief financial officer to now financial literacy and focusing on women, because at some point in my career, a few years back, I started to realize the profound effect that history has on women and their ability to leverage money. For example, where I'm at in the United States, women have only been able to get a credit card in their name for 50 years. That's only 1% of the lifetime of the financial institutions. So I became very passionate about focusing on women because our history shows up a lot because we're brand new to this money game. And what gets me really excited in talking about this is what experts refer to as the great wealth transfer that is to happen over the next 10 years, where something like $38 trillion is about to exchange hands. And most of that will be the hands of women. And so my goal is to make sure that when that happens, we do right by this wealth transfer. We are educated so that we can create a shift in the history timeline.
That's really powerful. I really like that. So rather than just waiting for the wealth transfer to happen and then women just going, well, how do we handle this? It's that pre-preparation stage right from the get-go. That's really cool.
Yeah. I believe a lot of it is about preparation. A lot of people call it luck. I call it preparation meets opportunity. There are so many opportunities out here. And instead of waiting to do what you need, when you are prepared, you can take full advantage of these opportunities. So I think it's going to be really important for women, especially.
Yeah, awesome. I just wanted to take a step back because I'm really curious. What was the lesson that you got from your bus driver?
So at the time, I was 15 years old and it was so awkward. And me and my friend were like, what is this guy doing? What is he talking about? But we were sitting in the seat right behind the bus driver. And all of a sudden he was like, girls, take out a pad of paper. Matter of fact, here's a pad of paper. Take it. Here's a pen. I want you to write something down. And he said, you guys are going to be old enough to where you're going to need to get a job and you're going to have to live on your own. He said, write this down. Minimum wage is $6 an hour. You're going to work about 35 hours a week. This is what you're going to take home after tax. So he taught us tax comes out of a paycheck. And he went line by line and was like, this is about what you're going to pay for rent. Then you got utilities. And then if you got a car, you got gas. And whatever's left is left. It was literally fourth grade math. But the way he broke it down to us was, this is what it is going to cost you to be financially independent.
What an enlightened bus driver. That's incredible.
To this day, I wish I could find him and be like, sir, you have no idea how you impacted my life.
So that leads me to a question, which is totally off script. Why isn't this taught in schools? Why does it take a bus driver to give you that information?
I'm sure there are a lot of theories on why it is not taught in school. And I subscribe to a few of them. I think that education in general is about to undergo a huge transformation, because what worked back then is not working now, and people are realizing it. And I think that there's a massive shift that needs to happen and that is naturally happening. And so like in the US, there are only 2 states last time I checked that required financial literacy as a class. And the reason why this is so important, money is required. No matter how you feel about it, bad things are done with money, yes, but nothing great ever happened without it either. And without being equipped with the knowledge and the skill set on how to properly manage your money, we fall victim to instant gratification, is what I call it. For example, when you turn 18, you don't have financial literacy under your belt, but I promise you'll get a credit card application in the mail the day you turn it. Happy birthday. You want a credit card? And so we're given all of the tools to satisfy instant gratification and squander our money. And so we have to counteract that.
Yeah. And I liked what you said about we get to a point where there's the instant gratification. We fall victim to that. What kind of popped up in my mind is we fall victim to those who have ideas for our money that require them getting our money versus us being able to keep our money.
Yes, ignorance is very profitable.
Yeah. It leads me to think about another quote that I heard recently, which is that money transfers from the impatient to the patient.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. And there was a study done by Ellevest, a women's investment platform. And this is where, speaking to women specifically, our innate strengths, our natural divine feminine qualities really serve us. So Ellevest did a study on the investment patterns and success rates of women versus men, and women out invest men. Their returns are higher because of that patience component. And so you're right. And another example is Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett started investing when he was 10 years old. He didn't accumulate his wealth until he was later in life, I think his 50s or 60s. He was patient. The only reason he's the wealthiest man is because he's one of the most patient. He's actually not the best investor. He's just been doing it for longer than the best investor.
He's definitely got his 10,000 hours in.
Yes. Yes, he does.
Now, I read that you at one point were living in a homeless shelter to now becoming the money whisperer. So what was the transition there? How did that happen?
So when I had found myself in a women's shelter, it was the result of a domestic abuse situation, which is also something that women face. So there was definitely a lowest of low for me. And that was it. And, after that situation happened, it was motivating for me to never go back to that situation ever again. And that's when I really started to form my independence and work in 2 jobs. That's right before I decided to go back to school. That was also before I had my first child. And when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, that was a paradigm shift for me. Like being a mother, that role in life gave me something more than at the time I could find within myself to strive for, to make something of myself. Like having this little human look up at me and me thinking 10 years down the road, what do I want to have shown her? Everybody says you have to have a why and it has to be deep. Well, when I got pregnant with her, I could not find any why within myself. She became my why. And from that, I learned how to become my own why.
That's a really beautiful story. It's a tragedy that you had to go through that in the first place. But I can see and feel the strength that's come as a result. So that's really inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious as well, what are some of the lessons that you have been teaching your daughter around money so that she can be fully empowered in what she chooses to do? I know she's still a teenager as well, right?
Yes, she's 17 now. And it really started when she was old enough to help around the house. She helped around the house. And while she didn't get money directly for that, the lesson in that was that you have to be accountable to helping and being responsible and being appreciative of what you have, keeping your room clean and your toys organized, the idea of taking care of what you have. And then it got to the point when she got a little bit older where I heard this idea one time that instead of paying your kids a set allowance, pay them based on a commission-like structure. Because some of the most money you can make are in sales and commission positions, right? And so maybe it's 50 cents to take out the trash and $2 to sweep the floor. And you get to pick, like you have the freedom of choice. You pick whichever ones you want based on how much money you want, and you do that, right? And another thing I did from the very beginning, even when she started getting birthday money, is she had to save 50% of her money. And that is the only way that any wealthy person has ever gotten wealthy. They are professional savers. And it's that delayed gratification. It's that patience. And so that was another thing I did from the very, very beginning. I also got her out there working at a young age. My family owns a business as well, and it's labor work. And so, she did that to show like, we got to work for what we get. Like, we're not just going to get it and just for free and without work. You got to be willing to hustle a little bit. There's a time and place for that. So it was very intentional, and it was over the span of her life.
That's really cool. And you've just given me an idea. My daughter is very conscientious and she's great. You give her a task, she'll get it done. My son needs a little bit more motivation. And there's some jobs that he prefers more than others, the easier ones. So I really like the idea of putting a pay scale to some of the jobs that he doesn't prefer, so that he can see that there's value in actually getting that work done.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know how that works.
I will. Thank you.
And each kid is different. My son is 7 years old, and he is not hesitant at all to get down, get dirty, and earn some money. And now with my daughter being 17, sometimes I'm almost unsure how she's my child, because all of a sudden she can't remember how to save and she loves spending money on things she doesn't need. So, as a parent, I give her that season and that grace. And when she finds out on her own that maybe mom was a little bit right, then I'll be there and we'll pick back up.
Yeah, but you know what? They say that the first 7 years, the habits that you teach in the first 7 years are the ones that really do stick. So she may have her season where she, goes off track, as it were. But those habits will never, my opinion is that those habits will never really leave her. And so you've done well in helping her to learn those lessons from a young age.
Yeah, I agree. I have full faith that she will. This is, it's part of being a teenager. Some of it, you got to let them, go through that part of life, and we all come back eventually.
Yeah, cool. Now, you said that mindset around money is the key to success. What are some of the money stories that actually are taking us off track?
Yes. I really love talking about this. And I think it's worth mentioning too, that I believe that we are all energy. We give energy, we receive energy, we invite even unconsciously, maybe sometimes energy. And the cool thing is I'm also a science nerd. So I love biology, neurobiology, physics. And the cool thing about it is science is actually successfully studying, measuring, and monitoring these energy fields. Everybody has an energy field 2 to 4 inches or more is somewhere in there outside of their body. So at the core of all of us, like you said, from ages 0 to about 7, they call that your imprint period. And you more or less are operating from your subconscious during those years. And by the time you fully come into conscious and you start projecting yourself to the world, over 50% of your core values and beliefs are already established. And so what some of us are being taught in that window, and sometimes we can get profound lessons outside of that 0 to 7 years. This is just a kind of a core timeline. But some of us were taught things, or things were implied to us without being actually said, that you have to work yourself into the ground to make an honest living. And if you make too much money, that's not okay. People that have too much money are bad. We're poor. You could never get out of here. You can't make that much money. You start a business, but you can't charge that much. Your value is not that high. And throughout, as we grow up during those years, it's reinforced to us through media, through social platforms. All of these little subliminal messages are put out there to us of, well, you need to look this way, and you need to have this house, and you need to spend money over here, and, all of these things. And so that's a lot of what I like to talk about, because money is an inanimate tool. It doesn't care what is right, wrong, real, true, fake, false. You do. It is a tool. It is a simple tool. The other 90% of money is all the feelings that we have around it and all of the value that we tether to it and what it means about us.
Oh, that's cool. That reminded me of something that I like to talk about in terms of investing in alignment with your values. And I know that there's certain things that are really important to me that I'm always going to be willing to spend that money on. And there's some certain things that are just, I'm appalled by, that I wouldn't want to spend my money on or invest into, because it just doesn't align with who I am. So it's not the money in my pocket per se. It's just how I feel about those things that I'm going to invest in or spend on, that is really the power or the lack of power in the money choices that I might make or other people might make.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's an important first question to ask is, what does being financially free and happy actually look like to you? Because money helps. Like, we're not going to sugarcoat that. Money definitely helps, but money is not the creator of happiness. What you do with that money and the time it affords you, that is what dictates your happiness. So I love the idea of value aligned spending and not sacrificing your present self for your future financially free self and making those wise decisions. And as long as you're honoring your boundaries, no shame with what you spend money. If you want a $65 Stanley and you can afford it without sacrificing your future investments, do it. I'm a nail person. I love getting my nails done and I love getting designs. And I do it shamelessly because I'm not sacrificing any of my other budget line items to do it. I'm not putting myself in a situation. And so I think that's an important piece too. If you have your value aligned spending and somebody has opinion, everybody's going to have opinions, but you do it because it feeds you, not because social media tells you that you should want X, Y, and Z. A lot of times people create this vision of how they want their life to be, but it's not actually theirs. It's somebody else's vision that they have taken on. And so they finally acquire this place and they're like, wait, why am I not happy still? I thought I was supposed to be happy when I had the things and the lifestyle. And you're right. It's because it has to be your values that you're aligning with.
Now, another question for you. Some people tell themselves the lie that they don't earn enough to save. How can they break free from that and start flexing that money saving muscle?
Yes, that is the number one reason I don't have enough or I don't make enough. And what I say to that is that if we can't manage $1,000, we can't manage $100,000. Savings is not about how much you save. How much you are setting aside is irrelevant. What's more powerful for you is the habit of every time I get money, I set some aside so that when that opportunity meets your preparation, you have that habit, you're going to protect it, you're going to set it aside. Think of savings more of an action than an amount.
That's cool. And that's quite a different mindset in a way to what we're taught and what's shared in the media.
Yeah. And even professionals, because a lot of financial advisors over here, at least, unless you have $150,000 in cash, they aren't even willing to work with you. And so that can seem so out of reach for people, right? And that feeds that line of thinking of like, oh, well, I don't have enough to invest. I don't have enough to save until I have $150,000 sitting in the bank. And all this money that just seems so unattainable. I'm not even going to try. Whatever. I'm out. It's not for me, But there are absolutely other ways to go about doing that. And saving is the absolute first step.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, every once in a while, I'll hear a story about somebody that's on a low income and on a job with a low income. And but they've managed to amass quite a lot of money. And the two habits that always stick out to me is the ability to save and the ability to invest what they've saved, and have that compounding over the longer term.
Yeah, there was a really big popular story in the States, and authors write about it now, about a janitor on the East Coast. He was a janitor for his entire career. And when he passed away, he had millions And nobody knew, and everybody was just confounded as to how could a janitor be this wealthy? But it's exactly because of that. It's because he lived inside of his equation. We are all living in the same exact equation. Money we earn minus money we spend equals money we keep and invest. He lived within his means. He protected savings and he prioritized investing and on a janitor's salary. So that is the proof. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really inspirational story. I remember you saying earlier that, it's only the last 50 years that women have had the ability to have credit cards, rightly or wrongly. Some women do feel like they're on the back foot as a result of, all of the structural barriers like the gender pay gap, the superannuation gap, the gender savings gap, taking time out of the workforce, all of that. So what are some of the key tips that you give to women to help them get ahead and help them feel more in control of their finances?
The first thing I say is you have to give yourself grace. Like think back to the fact that women have only been part of what I refer to as the financial algorithm for 1% of its life. Now, if you think about it like that, women have made leaps and bounds in that 1% of time. So give yourself grace. We are brand new at even being allowed to play the game of money. And number two is learn the skills that we need to be able to play the game of money. It takes time. I have been doing this for 17 years, and there are still things that I learn that I didn't know. And just when you think you found a strategy with money that works, the economy or something changes on you and you got to pivot. So you have to be a student, a lifelong student of your money. And I'll also add that, part of the gender pay gap has to do with the fact that as women, we are not as good at being assertive and negotiating. A lot of women can benefit greatly from just looking on YouTube and finding people who speak about the art of negotiation. Because if we can come forward and negotiate our salaries in a very strategic way, there's a strategic way to do this with poise and grace and professionalism. And I just sometimes I think about, man, if we trained every woman on the art of negotiation and had them all go to their bosses next Monday, I want to look at the gender wage gap the week after. I would just love to know how much of that gap is because it is not a strong suit of ours to negotiate how much we're getting paid.
Yeah, a few things there. I thought of the, I don't know if Monty Python ever sort of made it across to your shores. There was one part of it where they were talking about haggling and, there was a store holder and he was like, you won't haggle. And I always think about that as haggling is something that's just a little bit cringy, but I get what you're saying, like without asking for what we're worth, there are some employers that will say, look, I really value you and here, have this. But also at the same time, if we're not prepared to haggle or understand what we're worth and be able to negotiate that, then we're really doing ourselves a disservice as women.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I believe that there's a lot of historical conditioning within that as well. Not having a voice, not being welcomed at the table. So again, grace, and this takes time and we have to take it one step at a time. And I think that, as women continue this journey, it's going to be incredibly important for us to trust our divine, our innate feminine. Because I know, something that I went through in my career path, in my industry, it is still overwhelmingly dominated by men. And so what happened to me and what happens to so many other women is that to be successful in a still male-dominated field, we have to emulate masculine. And that is not who we are naturally. And so I think that you have to also be very conscious and aware of, we can do this while embracing our feminine. Yes, we can learn this, that, and the other, but there is also a boundary where, it shouldn't be our goal to emulate the masculine. It should be our goal to magnify our feminine.
100%. So specifically to that, how do we play the game of money in our divine feminine power?
So two things come to mind. The first of which is that study that Ellevest did. Go look up that study. Ellevest is a female founder-based investment platform. And let that be inspiration for you to trust that piece of you, that patience that we have innately. Let that be inspiration for you. The other thing that comes to mind is that women make fantastic leaders. And look, you don't need to be in a leadership position to be a leader. There are a lot of studies that show that publicly traded companies that have women leadership not only generate more profit, but cultivate a more positive work environment, because these are our natural strengths. And so, look to these examples. And again, no matter where you are at, work on that leadership, because we make great, compassionate leaders.
That's so beautiful. Now, Carrie, this is pretty much the end of our interview today. And so I wanted to say thank you for joining us here. Thank you for the wisdom that you've had to share. I've learned so much, and I'm sure that people listening or watching later will do as well. Now, for anybody that wants to learn more about you, work with you at some point, how can they do that?
Yeah. So first, feel free to listen to my podcast. It's called Always and Never About the Money. And my website is moneymastery.work, where we are in the process of building out a personal finance program, an online personal finance program. I'm also in the process of writing my first book. So you can head over to the website and subscribe to get all the updates for when everything opens up.
Fantastic. And I'll be sure to put the links into the show notes so anybody can follow up with you and make that really easy.
Yes. And thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I love these conversations because, number one, I learn a lot, as I said before, but I just, it's not what I get from this interview and what I get from this podcast series is that it's not just about the money. It's really about the relationship that we have with ourselves. And then that flows out into the money that we have and that we can grow and that we can invest and ultimately secure our financial future.
Absolutely.
Thank you again.